Let's continue our conversation on the Moral Letters by Lucius Annaeus Seneca. And yes, it is true that this camera tends to flicker quite a bit. So I'm trying to keep my head stable. I've switched different things around. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're going over the Moral Letters by Lucius Annaeus Seneca, and last time we did part of letter 81, but it's quite a long letter, and I thought this was an interesting point he makes. Excuse me, he makes here as well. And like we discovered last time, in this letter he is talking about gratitude and people doing things because they should be doing them, and not because they shouldn't do them to do them and expect gratitude, right? You do good things because you want to do good things, not because you want to do good things and also expect gratitude. Anyway, back in section, actually way over in section 20, he says, everyone who helps another person helps himself. I do not mean that one who has received aid will want to offer aid, or that one who has been protected will want to protect others. Nor do I mean that a good deed circles back by example to the doer. Bad examples too revert to those who set them. No one wins any pity when the wrongs they suffer are just what they taught others how to do. No, I mean that every virtue is its own reward. For one doesn't practice the virtues in order to receive a prize. The reward for right action is having acted rightly. I do not show gratitude in order that my example will make someone else more generous in showing gratitude to me, but simply in order to perform a most pleasant and beautiful action. I show gratitude not because it is expedient, but because it is agreeable. To prove this to you, if the only way I could show gratitude were by appearing to be ungrateful, if I could not return a benefit except by seeming to injure someone, I would be quite content to carry out an honorable intention in the midst of infamy. No one, I think, values virtue more or is more devoted to it than the man who has lost his good reputation in order to keep a good conscience. And what I started to think about reading that was the concept of virtue that we have certainly talked about quite a lot of times in these videos, because virtue is a core concept in Stoic philosophy. But I think it is good once in a while to kind of remind yourself of why that is the case and what exactly is meant by being virtuous. So trying to apply it to this situation, remember that typically in this kind of virtue ethics, this sort of virtue philosophy, ethics features very heavily, right? That's why it's virtue ethics. So being virtuous is vital to be able to lead a happy life. The idea there being that if you do not act virtuously, then you can't really be happy. But what exactly is meant by being virtuous? And typically the 4 cardinal virtues are used. So virtue is typically taken to mean something like practical wisdom, justice, courage, temperance. So practical wisdom means knowing what the right thing to do is. Justice, I suppose you could say, is kind of doing the right thing, right? Do what is right and do not do what is wrong. Courage is courage, not just in a situation of combat or something, but also in everyday life. Having the courage to also do the right thing, which is not always easy. And then finally, there is temperance, which is a word that we don't come across on a daily basis in modern society. But temperance is something like, not quite modesty, but doing things in moderation, right? Do something in moderation. And those 4 things together make up virtue, and you could have debates about that because there are other things that you could add to that list of 4 cardinal virtues. But I would say those 4 are certainly among the core concepts. Now, the interesting thing about those virtues is that they are also all accompanied by a vice, right? For wisdom, there is folly. So not knowing what the right thing is to do doing things that do not make sense. I'm simplifying that a little bit. For courage, of course, you have cowardice, and for justice, you have injustice, and for temperance, typically I think the term chosen is gluttony, but kind of overdoing it, not doing things in moderation, but doing things in excess. Gluttony typically refers to eating, but you could of course do many things in excess, and these days we would probably say that could lead to addictions, right? Addictive behavior. And so what I've always found interesting about that characterization of virtue is that you get some fairly broad concepts, but concepts that you can really think about and that you can really try to apply to your life, right? Some of these, I think all of them, but some of these can be quite complicated. Wisdom is difficult. Knowing what the right thing to do is can be a very difficult concept and difficult decision. So that can certainly make things harder, because it's not always easy to know what the right course of action or the right decision is. But having said that, in a lot of everyday life, it's fairly obvious what the right thing to do is, right? If you talk about everyday small decisions like everybody makes, then it's often not difficult to figure out what the right thing to do is, what the right decision to make is. And I think that is something that we often forget about, but Stoicism really is a type of philosophy that takes those concepts very, very seriously, right? Stoics would say, as many other proponents of virtue ethics would, virtue is the most important thing. And what we often forget is the minutiae of what that actually extends to. Making the right decision can be small things. Can be something as simple as maybe do not say something gossipy about someone to someone else. And these are things that we do. I think human beings like those sorts of things. We like to have, oh, did you hear about, those sorts of interactions. But a Stoic would say that's wrong. Even at such a small level, right? That's not the right thing to do. It is not wise to pursue that course of action. It's not virtuous. And then there are, of course, much bigger decisions that people make that have consequences as well. So I think it is good once in a while to remind yourself of those 4 cardinal virtues, and then try to think about how you can apply them in everyday life. And I think one of the final things I have to say about that is remember, or at least try to remember, how the practice of Stoicism really requires you to practice these sorts of virtues very consistently. Everybody will make mistakes and everybody will slip up once in a while. That's inevitable. But it does take effort. It takes effort to continuously think about what is the right decision for me to make. Is this a just decision to make? Although this is difficult, do I have the courage to make this decision? Am I being temperate? Right? Am I overdoing it? Is this too much or too little? Because that's also an issue, right? So I think that continuously asking yourself those sorts of questions will certainly help you put that principle into practice. And it's an important principle. It's an important principle. It's like I said, a foundational aspect of Stoicism that you practice and must continue to practice. Understanding and knowing full well that you will make mistakes and will slip up at times and do something where you later think, okay, that's maybe, I probably should not have done that, but I did it at that time. And then you can always come back to that, right? You can come back to that by learning from it. And that's, I already said that was going to be the final thing I would say, but this is really the final thing I will say. learn from it, look back at what you have done, and then think about, in the future, were I to find myself in the same situation again, what would I do differently? And I think that is a continued habit of self-reflection, not self-criticism, but self-reflection, to think about what you are doing, why you are doing that, and then deciding in the future, when this situation arises again, I will not do X, or I will do Y this time, because I think that will be a better approach. And that self-reflectance, I think, can help tremendously in putting virtue into practice. So, there we have it. That was it for this week. I hope this was useful. Let me know how you try to put these sorts of things into practice, because that's always interesting to read. And I'll be back next week with more talk about Stoicism. Bye.